Cao Chufeng in Wuzhou. Well, let's talk now to David Learmount, who's an aviation expert and consulting editor at Flight Global. He joins us now. Thank you for being on the programme, David. So as we were hearing from our reporter there, one of the black boxes from the plane has now been recovered. What will happen to it? What information can teams hopefully extract from it?
Well, it depends which one it is. There's a cockpit voice recorder which records what the pilots are saying to each other, what air traffic control, what conversation air traffic control has with them, and all the ambient sounds in the flight deck. So you can learn a lot from that. But the recorder that tells us most is the flight data recorder, and that has things like speed, power settings, altitude, everything that the airplane is doing, and it gives a general health check on the aircraft and the profile through the air that the aircraft is following. So when we get that, we learn a lot.
If it is the voice recorder, though, it will back up those suggestions that there was no distress call and no response to air traffic controllers. Why do you think that was? That's puzzling, but it's not the first time aircraft have ever crashed with no call to anybody. There are various things that can make this happen. Either the aircraft suddenly basically goes out of control, and the pilots are so busy trying to get it back under control that they literally don't have the mental capacity to put out a mayday call. There's that possibility, and there is the other horrifying possibility for which there is no direct evidence yet, but there have been several cases in the last 30 years, and in fact even much more recently than that, in about the last 7 years, when pilots have literally taken pilots with a mental problem have taken an opportunity to commit suicide and have not cared that they had a whole airplane full of people with them. And so that the actual dive is deliberate. Now, as I say, there's no direct evidence of that at the moment, but the profile that this flight followed and the descent that this flight followed was remarkably similar to an event such as the one I just discovered, carried out by an airline, or the crew of an airline called Germanwings, which naturally enough was a German airline, in 2015, and everybody on board that was killed. Now, I hope that is not the reason, because it's so ghastly, but the profile looked very, very familiar. David, I want to ask you about this video that's been widely shared, that it said shows the plane plummeting to the ground. How does that fit into the information we have already? I'm not at all convinced that what was shown there on I think it was a car dash cam. So we're not talking about high-quality photography here. It's quite impossible to work out what that object was that appeared to be falling out of the sky. So I'm not prepared at this stage to believe that has anything to do with this accident. And you mentioned the flight profile. There's a suggestion, isn't there, that the plane didn't come down at a constant speed or height. What could cause that? Well, we do know that it was at about 30,000 feet. That's about 9,000 meters. And you know, it took about 3 minutes from the time that it was flying level until the time it hit the ground. Now, that descent rate, if it was constant throughout, would be a very fast descent rate of about 10,000 feet per minute. But it seems from the tracking signal that we have from Flight Radar 24, which tracks aircraft and the commercial tracking service, it indicates that the descent was not constant, and that at some points the descent was really frantic, and other points it actually was arrested, and there was even a slight climb. Now, again, with that link that they get, that's supplied by this particular technology, I'm not sure how absolutely we can trust every single small detail of it. But one thing is absolutely certain: that aircraft descended from its cruising altitude to impact at the rate, the average rate at which a pilot would put an aircraft into an emergency descent on purpose if, for example, there was a sudden decompression and all the air, escaped from the airplane at high altitude where the air is thin. And the pilots wanted to get the aircraft down into thicker air so everybody could breathe without having to have a supplementary oxygen. That is about the rate, the average rate, that they would carry out such a descent. But if that had been the case, they would have leveled out at about 10,000 feet, about, it didn't do that. So we're back to the sort of what on earth happened here? Are we talking about sabotage, something terribly sudden, or are we talking about a deliberate act?